Good Saturday evening, everybody. I'm meteorologist Tim Pandajis here with your tropical update on August 21st, 2021. Of course, we're talking about Henri, which is now a Category 1 hurricane. And as of the latest advisory that we'll talk about in more detail, it is slightly stronger. It's organizing itself over some very warm sea surface temperatures for at least the next couple of hours. Now, Henri will be the first hurricane to strike New England in decades. The last was Hurricane Bob back in 1991. And it's likely to cause widespread power outages and flooding across a large portion of interior southern New England as well. Wind will be also the issue too, but once the storm makes it inland, it's going to rain itself out over all those interior states. Now, here's how it looks over the last 48 hours on satellite imagery. The reason why I'm showing you this storm that long is because I want to give you kind of a perspective of where it's been and where it's going. For the first several days of its life cycle, it's been combating northerly or northeasterly wind shear, and that helped the system to develop in a tilted nature. It was struggling to get itself upright, but now that the wind shear has diminished, the storm itself is more vertically aligned, and now it's better able to, at least I should say, take advantage of the atmospheric conditions that are conducive for it to strengthen. We're talking about those very warm sea surface temperatures, a moist atmospheric profile, and also just not a whole lot of dry air around too, and the wind shear is very, very low as well. But there's how it looks recently on satellite imagery. Through much of the day today, it was kind of stagnant, plateauing at 75-mile-per-hour winds, Category 1 storm. And for a while too, it was struggling to get any convection going, most of which was east and southeast of that storm center. But the last 3 hours here, I want you to pay attention to that storm center, which you can kind of make out right here, and a flare-up of these colors of black and white. Now, these indicate very cold cloud top temperatures. The colder the cloud top, the stronger the storm is. So we're seeing that flare up around the center, and if it does strengthen further, it'll try to wrap itself around that center of circulation here, but that window is starting to close, and I'm going to show you why in just a second. Hurricane Hunter aircraft is in the storm as we record this video. They recorded a pressure of 984 millibars. At the 4 o'clock advisory, the pressure was 991. The brand new update coming from the Hurricane Center now says it's down to 988. So they extrapolated a little bit, saying that was a little low, will come down to 988. So any drop in pressure does indicate the storm is deepening and taking advantage of those warm sea surface temperatures and the overall environmental profile that's very conducive. I think it's very evident here how it is starting to strengthen a little bit. We put the contours on the clouds. You can see the elevation of them starting to lift a little bit as it continues to develop convection around that center. But that window, as I mentioned, is closing. The extent of warm waters, sufficient enough to support tropical development, you need 80 degrees or warmer. And this line here where the orange starts and the blue begins is where the 80-degree waters end. North of there, it's 78, 79, still warm, but not likely enough to support a lot of strengthening with the storm. It may maintain its strength, but likely as it gets closer to the coast and we get those sea surface temperatures falling even more, we should see it weakening as it approaches landfall. Also, it's right over the Gulf Stream. And that is a river of very warm sea surface temperatures and warm water overall, even to a depth that's continuously moving like a river. And right now it's located right on top of it. So it is taking advantage of that and using that warm water to build up some strength before it lifts north in those colder sea surface temperatures in the short term. As I mentioned, I think it should lead to some weakening on the approach to the coastline of Long Island and southern New England. So here's the 7 o'clock advisory. There are no changes to the track itself. That will come at 11 o'clock tonight if there are any changes to be made. But a lot of the models in consensus here, taking this almost due north-northeast towards the eastern portion of Long Island coastline there, and then into New England over Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, and eventually into Vermont and New Hampshire too. But I want you to notice something here too. Once it moves over land, we really start to drop its intensity. That's expected. You're away from its fuel source. Tropical systems need warm, moist environments, warm sea surface temperatures for their fuel. The second they're away from that, they start to degrade, and that's what's expected to happen rapidly here. Of course, you have the enhanced terrain, too, of New England. Now, just for your information here, these are the advisory schedules from the National Hurricane Center. I just went over the 8 p.m. intermediate advisory. The next update will be a full update. We'll have new stats, a new track from the Hurricane Center coming out at 11, and these occur 8 times a day, 4 intermediates, 4 full advisories, so just so you know when to check back when there'll be new updated information. So that storm track is kind of weird looking, right? It moves north and then goes whoops right out to sea. Well, there's atmospheric steering patterns in play here, and this is what's going on with Henri and why it looks so interesting. We've got an upper level area of low pressure here that's sitting over the Virginias, and that's acting to tug Henri a little bit more to the west and keep it from going out to sea. At the same time, an upper level ridge is developing north of that upper level low. This will be pivoting its way off to the east, and as it does so, its return flow will help shuffle that storm Henri up north and northeast into New England in the coming 18 hours or so as it approaches landfall. So there are some complicating factors to this. This storm will be more impactful than a storm, say, arriving on any other day. Why? Well, what preceded Henri? A very long stretch of rainy, nasty, unsettled weather in New England. Saturated soils. Root systems are compromised. You get strong gusty winds coming in there. Those trees fall a whole lot more easily. Plus, getting another 6 to 8 inches on top of that won't help those root systems either. Also, Henri is forecast to hit tomorrow. Tomorrow late morning, early afternoon. Tomorrow is the full moon, and that means high tides are astronomically just a little bit higher from it being a full moon. You get the higher tides, you get the persistent onshore flow, storm surge threat is that much higher in coastal areas. And the expanding wind field as it lifts north, meaning more areas will experience the gusty winds, maybe hurricane force in some spots before it rapidly degrades, but that will mean that compromised root systems will lead to widespread power outages. I just want to bring to your attention the forecast high tides for tomorrow morning, all throughout southern New England, Montauk, New York on Long Island 9:18, and it goes all the way up to Bridgeport, Connecticut around noon tomorrow. So all of this time we're going to have onshore winds piling that water into Long Island Sound, up along the southern Long Island coast, into Newport, Rhode Island, westerly, places up to Cape Cod, Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket. You know the deal up there. Now, the current wind field with this storm, hurricane force winds only extend out to the southeast 40 miles. We've always talked about the worst part of the storm, the dirty side of the storm, is going to be the east of the center, the right side. And that's where we're finding the hurricane force winds. The bottom right, the southeast side of the storm, 40 miles out from the center. However, tropical storm force winds extend a much larger area. That is this yellow blob around here. That's 39 mile per hour winds or stronger. At the longest point, 130 miles to the southeast. So again, bottom right seeing the strongest of the winds. As we go forward in time, progressing through tonight and into tomorrow, we see that blob of the wind field maintaining its overall diameter, but notice the strongest of the winds are going to move inland into western or eastern portions of Connecticut, Rhode Island, eastern Massachusetts, and over Long Island as well. Then it moves inland, the wind field rapidly shrinks. The introduction of the friction of the landmass will slow those winds down. After landfall, the winds will really start to diminish. However, the next threat is going to be the storm surge. Well, first with winds will be the storm surge, and then lots of heavy rainfall and some flooding. Let's look at the wind forecast as we go through tonight and into tomorrow. We'll go into tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. There's the center of Henri, well to the south of Montauk, New York. We've got the winds coming in out of the south and then eventually southeast, so that is funneling the water into Long Island Sound, building up those tidal values as we approach high tide by mid to late morning tomorrow. 9:30 a.m., getting close to hurricane force wind gusts on that eastern tip of Long Island, and I thought this was interesting here. This particular model at 11 o'clock tomorrow forecasts the center of Henri to move pretty much right over this observation post in Montauk. Notice the winds dropping down to almost calm. When you get to the center of a storm, a hurricane, and a really pronounced hurricane when you have a cleared out eye, the sun will come out, winds will go calm, and a lot of time that gives people the false sense of security that the storm's over. Then you get the backside of the storm, winds shift, and it's a whole bad scenario there. But that's interesting to show you there that the winds do calm down a bit, but then they whip back up, coming in the opposite direction, gusting back and over 50 miles per hour by lunchtime. And then after the storm is well inland by 5 tomorrow afternoon, the winds are still gusty, but they're not nearly as strong as when the storm was still strengthening and over the open waters. So we have the storm surge warnings up for all of the coastal areas in and throughout Long Island Sound, the southern coast of Long Island, and all of Rhode Island and Massachusetts as well. You're going to get the strongest, the worst storm surge to the east, to the right of that storm center. Here's the projected storm surge values. Highest storm surge threat, where the warnings are, 3 to 5 feet above normally dry ground. And remember, I talked about the astronomically higher tides too, so that will keep those levels even higher. Now, the flood potential is there too. This scale goes up to 4, and we're at a level 3 for tomorrow, moderate risk through much of the red area here, most of Connecticut, the Hudson Valley, northern New Jersey. Now, you may be saying to yourself, well, Tim, you just said that the worst of the storm is usually to the east on the right side of the storm. That is true for the wind, but a lot of times we've witnessed storms that are undergoing an extratropical transition, particularly over New England and the Northeast, tend to rain themselves out and bring the majority of the moisture to the west side or the left side of the track. So that's what we're likely seeing here, and that's what the models are depicting. 3 to 5, 5 to 7 inches or more, locally higher amounts in some of these areas in the red just within the next 24 to 36 hours. Now, the last storm to hit New England was all the way back in 1991. It was Hurricane Bob. That did make landfall as a Category 2 with 100-mile-per-hour winds. This storm will not be that strong, but again, the complicating factors, as I mentioned, the preceding rainfall for the past several weeks, the full moon, astronomically higher tides. We didn't have that during Hurricane Bob, so keep that in mind there. All their warnings and watches, we've been upgraded to warnings everywhere. Tropical storm warnings in orange. In the pink is a hurricane warning up through tomorrow. Now, Henri was our third hurricane of the season so far. When we look at climatology, we typically see our third hurricane of the season by September 9th. So we are a little bit ahead of schedule by a couple of weeks, but all in all, that's what's going on there in terms of climatology. I want to quickly touch on Grace before we wrap things up. Grace yesterday rapidly intensified. That's a deepening or an increase of maximum sustained winds of around 34 miles an hour over 24 hours of time. This thing went from a Cat 1 to a Cat 3 before landfall in under 24 hours, and it was the first major hurricane of the 2021 season. It made landfall in Veracruz, Mexico, one of only 2 major hurricanes to ever make landfall in that area on record. So we'll continue to watch Henri for you, bringing the update at 11 o'clock, and again, 2 a.m. overnight and 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. You'll have new runs right before landfall, late morning into early afternoon. If you have any questions, reach out on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook. If you're in the path of Henri, make sure you're making all those preparations and take the storm seriously. Despite what category it is, the threats will remain the same. We'll see you next time.